Hey, welcome. This is The Process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is lesson 105 for the 2022 season. We are pursuing information data on the big question, does ADP have any predictive power, let's call it, of versus the end of the season results on a player. Okay, obviously, best case scenario would be 100% predictive, and then that would probably make this boring. But I will give you a hint, it is not close to 100% predictive. And there are some interesting aspects to that. So please review the first 4 lessons, and now we're going to continue and kind of get into the meat of this whole situation, this questioning here. Let's see if I hit this button here. There we go. Okay, so first thing we're going to start off with is the quarterback position. And my data is from 2015 to 2021. So it's a 7-year window, and I've combined that data. And to me, visual graphs are a little bit more powerful than just the charted actual tabular data here. Okay. So there's some dots and, well, some diamonds and lines and things. So let's kind of go over it. The y-axis here is the end of the season result. So the first through the 36th quarterback. Okay. And along this, the horizontal axis, the X-axis, is the ADP sector in slices of 6 draft positions. The last 7 years, there's not been a quarterback drafted in the first 12 picks. So I start here with quarterbacks, 13th through the 18th, all the way to the 157 overall pick here. So then each diamond represents a data point. It's the average of that 7-year end of the season versus the ADP sector here. So all the quarterbacks in this sector average nearly into the season about 6th quarterback on average right there. The next slice was the 19th to 24th. They ended up about 7th. So the 13th to 24th, so basically the second round of your draft, quarterbacks that are going there are coming back at somewhere between, on average, 6th and 7th quarterback at the end of the season. That is actually not bad at all. And you're saying, well, what would it look like if the data was 100% perfect? I drew this, just hand drew this imaginary line, this red line. That would be perfect. So in other words, the first would end up right here, the second quarterback, and so forth. So you can see that the data point averages do not fall on this line much. There's a few slices that do, but for the most part, it is not 100% predictive at all. And the trend line is kind of going here, which is kind of interesting and I marked the 12th best quarterback here in the purple. So the first time that the ADP slice that gets close to that average is the 31st through 36th pick and the 49th through 54th here. But then notice there is a retreat of that average back closer to 6, 7, 8. So quarterbacks, for the most part, with some exceptions, are returning kind of almost the same. In other words, the so-called best quarterbacks are giving you what the 37th through 42nd pick quarterbacks are returning on average. In fact, this slice, 25th through 30th, are actually returning close to 4.5 to 5 fifth best quarterback. So what that should tell you is, and this is the kind of the rule of thumb that's occurred because people have seen this data, it's the late quarterback concept that people are waiting later to pick their first quarterback, certainly around and probably even later, because a lot of the quarterbacks that are going later can end up falling 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and probably for what you invested, if you think of your picks as your draft capital here. And notice we're even staying under the 12th best quarterback way out to the 91st to 96th overall pick. So what is that? That's seventh. Is that seventh round? No, eighth round. Eighth round. And notice about the 97th, I did star that. We start seeing a little bit more in the line, the trend line starting to go up. There were some exceptions in here that were back down almost if you could pick those guys. So there is an opportunity waiting later to pick a quarterback. So that's been the last 7-year average. There's been a real strong in the last couple years, I think, people getting enamored with quarterbacks that, are early picks, Mahomes, Josh Allen, these kind of things. The issue is not that you're picking those and they won't return lots of points. They will. It's just the wide receiver or the running back you're not picking early on is the issue. So can you make up, if you think of fantasy football as a weekly kind of game, a matchup kind of situation, then you've got to, get more points than your opponent. You're going to have to make that up somewhere. And it looks, given this data, that some of your opponents will have later quarterbacks that are scoring pretty good too. But they probably picked up stronger running back and wide receivers, and that could, that's how they might catch up with your early picks. Okay, it depends on things, but that's the idea. So again, I think this 7-year story here pretty much is saying that the late quarterback is real. Now, notice I didn't say the last quarterbacks, right? At some point, you're going to be way, way above the 12th best. You're getting close to the 18th best. And that's going to be really hard if you wait to pick your quarterback one way out here. So there has to be some common sense in your draft planning. But now you've seen the trend, you can start making. To me, this this little region right in here seems to be kind of a nice little area here from about close to what, the 6th round, to maybe what is that, the 8th round, maybe something like 6th to 8th round. There's kind of a sweet spot there. Realize that the sharper folks in your league also know that, so that's not talked about. In other words, if everybody's waiting later, then there's going to be more of a competition in that. So it's going to be more of a trend, and then everybody's going to jump on board. In other words, they're going to stockpile running backs and wide receivers, then probably pick up a tight end, and then they're going to snag a quarterback. And that quarterback run could be over kind of quick, and all of a sudden you're picking a later quarterback. So you need in your head, planning your draft, okay, is to kind of think that range here. Maybe here's the question: what player is the worst quarterback you would take for your team, and where are they kind of going? Can you wait that late? Should you wait that late? I don't know. You just need to think about that. But that's why I like to see this. So the question for quarterbacks is, in fact, the ADP is a little bit predictive, but it's not so predictive that you can't try the late quarterback drafting strategy. If it was super predictive, then this opportunity wouldn't exist. And you would be getting right in here, the sweet spot, you would be getting above the 12th best quarterback. So you would be forced to jump in this. So you're buying yourself a few rounds to wait and delay with the trend that's been happening. So I think that's kind of neat there. At least I think it is. Okay. What about the tight ends? You can see right away that the tight ends trend line are way different than the quarterback trend line. In other words, and I drew the 12th tight end, and it's all kind of wacky here. But if we were hand drawing, right, we see that we are not close to the efficiency of the ADP versus the end of the season. It's just not happening. And 7 years, a quarterback has not been taken in the first 6, and this is in a regular tight end league, not a tight end premium kind of situation. So 7th to 12th sliver, all the way to 157th. What you're seeing is, for the most part, people can wait. You can wait until probably about nearly, 6th, 7th round, right here, maybe, the 84th, right in here. So, but you even kind of get some opportunities here on occasion to fish in this area. A lot of people will actually take 2 tight ends, and sometimes their later tight end can be performing better, probably due to injury, but maybe performing better than they would predict. So it's not as clear cut as the quarterback, because there seems to be this double dip scenario where you're not getting the best tight end per pick value here, because it's going up here, and you're getting a lot of these picks here, and this kind of almost the middle. And so I have been staying below the 7th round backward to get my quarterback. And notice that is kind of where people are grabbing their quarterbacks. So what's kind of a typical draft is people are grabbing 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, maybe 3 and 3, and then grabbing a tight end quarterback right after that. That puts them about the 8th round. So you, again, need to look at the suite of quarterbacks and see what you would be satisfied with, but the ADP is not predictive on tight ends as it wasn't with quarterback, but a different trend line certainly results here. So look at this, think about what it's saying, but that double dip is saying that if I'm picking, I'm probably picking my first tight end here and then trying to snag a surprise one way out in here and kind of avoiding this mid area here. Okay. So, I may, if with my second tight end, I may really take a stringer. And sometimes these, obviously over 7 years, things have come into play, and the tight ends that are been picked out in this range have come in for people. So it's not unheard of at all for this to occur. So it looks pretty good here. That's kind of my barbell strategy here, early and late kind of concept, and worrying about the middle rounds here and kind of staying away. That's been the trend, and that's why you can use trend lines to kind of start making some thoughts about that, right? And again, when I show you this, it's not like, oh, I'm stuck on this. Okay, this kind of data is here for you to imagine a draft, to plan, to think about things. What are you doing, right? It's up to you how you draft, Don't just blindly follow any ratings or any kind of thing. You've got to use common sense. But we can use numerical trends and predictions as a way to guide our thinking. And that's, people get a little muddled here in this whole thing about numbers and trends, and there are people out in the pundit land that are probably less savvy with deep stats and numbers than they will let on to be. Okay. And that's just, be careful, what you sample at the buffet table. Could be some food poisoning there for you. Just be cautious. Okay, so QBs have a way different pattern than tight end. What about running backs and wide receivers? And notice I'm getting to them last, and I've grouped them together. And notice right away that the trend is different than what we saw in the quarterback, and certainly with the tight end. If we were to draw a perfect, it would be, oh, well, my bad, I'm hand drawing, but it would be there. And notice that, the back half, a lot of and this is the running backs, are better than might be predicted, but the front half maybe is worse than. So I think what this is saying for us is some of those late round running backs, probably due to injury and other kinds of in-season opportunity, handcuff concept. These trend here supports that late handcuff concept, and I fully endorse that given this kind of 7-year trend line here. And that's occurring at about what the, was it 9th round? What is that, 98? Is that right? See, 9th round, that's 108, so about right there. So 8.5, 9 round. This is in this region here, and you're getting better than would be predicted by a perfect world here. But the bad news is you're getting worse than predicted early on. So there's a lot of variation here in the RBs. And if you'll notice, and I don't know if I can change the color, but check out these natural kind of collective tiers here. See how they kind of fall together to me? I thought this was kind of neat here. You know, if I was looking, I would think there's 5 basic tiers. And a lot of people do rank according to tiers. And it looks like running backs 1 to 6 so basically the first and second round running backs, people say, you know, grab at least 1 running back in there. And what they then will talk about, and I remember it last season, was that they so-called dead zone. What I think they're saying on the dead zone are these guys in here that are, you know, not returning the end of the season value past the 24th pick here. And after the 4th round, so 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and then you get this scenario, these handcuffs at the 9th pick. So I think you can start visualizing the RBs kind of like this. And just realize that the ADPs here can be about the same. So people are picking later RBs than what necessarily is going in the 1st round, and they're returning sometimes equal or average value. So just be aware on average that there is an opportunity here, and you're not, the end of the season, the ADP are not predictive in this range. And like I said, probably about to the 9th round, it's not very predictive here at all, because it's above this line here. Not predictive at all. I mean, in the sense of individuals, not in the sense of these tiers. I think this is telling us the 2-round slices are defining the expectation in our drafts for 2022. So I think you should, and again, this ADP is back, my data is closer to the end of August. So by that, a lot of things have shaken out, and you should probably slice the RBs based on the overall rounds and group them like that. Notice I didn't say put them in tiers necessarily. Let's call this research tiers, not ranking tiers. So I guess, so I invented a new term, research tiers. Research tiers for running backs make sense with this kind of 7-year trend. And that's what I would suggest people do, is slice it up like that and then dig deeper and think about your opportunities there. All at the same time, remember how the tight end and the quarterbacks are starting to be very important in this range as well. So if you're saying, oh, I'm going to, you know, something's really interesting here in this research tier 4, just realize that there's going to be this need on your team, quarterback and tight ends, especially if you're going later on both of those. So there's going to be that push in your head in the middle of a draft. And again, I urge slow drafting definitely You know, if you can avoid it, I know some drafts you can't, that's fine. But the more time you have, the more you can pull up data like this. So you can come back and watch this lesson again before you big money draft and just kind of get into this. And so that's what I would do. We break up into research tiers for the preseason. And then think about the rookie drafts in May. Where do those guys end up here? And that probably tells you something as well. And that's how I'm going to be approaching the RBs here. So in some ways, it is kind of linear. It kind of gets a little flat here, but then it takes off again. Certainly in this range, these are the handcuffs area. So, definitely consider the depth in, your team depth charts. These are essential research points there. Okay. Wide receivers. A little bit more interesting to me if we were to draw the wide receivers out. It's this region in here seems to fall pretty close to, and that should be average of end of season versus ADP in the 7 years. So I mistitled that. So to me, what I see, first thing that jumps out to me, was it about the fourth round to maybe the ninth round wide receivers are falling as the ADPs are kind of suggesting. In other words, not sure where the bargains are. It seems to me that, as you might predict, there may be some very interesting plays in here. So that would be a research tier for me there. And I think I would probably have 1, 2, 3, 4, a big one, 5 research tiers. But I think that fourth research tier for wide receivers is probably close to what would be predicted. Not sure the bargains that are there. On average, okay, this is not individual, this is thinking laws of bigger numbers here. So that's what it's telling me. So I think then in this big block, this fourth research tier, I'm not sure just how deep you've got to dig. I think the public is pretty sharp in this range here. I think that's what it's telling us. Whereas there is some little bit of variation in here. And notice what I thought was interesting in the 1 to 6 sliver, wide receivers going are close to returning almost perfect value. In the last 2 years, we haven't seen any wide receivers there. So I'm curious by June or July, is somebody like Devontae Adams or Cooper Kupp making in the top 6? If that's the case, this trend would really strongly support them as your a nice play there for your picks. So that's how I'm seeing wide receivers. And I think you've got some bargains in this fifth research tier there. And again, in that fourth research tier, there seems to be falling about as predictive. So I would, again, think there may be some interesting picks here and in there. This is falling close to what we would predict. Not sure how many sleepers are really out here based on this trend. Okay. So what I did is I wanted to compare wide receivers and running backs ADP versus end of the season. Okay, I wanted them together versus separate. Okay, and so the triangles are running backs. The yellow is the wide receiver, and then there is the trend lines. And again, perfect trend line would be something like that, maybe a little bit skewed that way. So clearly ADP and end of season, it's not very predictive. I did say though that the wide receivers that are in the 1 to 6, if there is any this year, have had a historical tendency to be really strong picks. Other than that, and notice that if you look at across the board, anything that's higher is worse. So notice running backs in the 1 to 6 or at 18. Wide receivers are about 7 or 8. So they've been returning nice value. They're about equal, a little bit better for wide receivers here. Running backs are doing better. Wide receiver, running back, and wide receiver, same. Running back, wide receiver, running back, wide receivers, running. So you can kind of plot the trends here, and we start seeing that the wide receivers out in this range are skewing higher than their ADP would suggest. So there's some opportunities, I think, in this range from about here to there. So what is that? About the 8th round later for these handcuff running backs to come into play. So that is worth your time versus spending all your time on trying to find the wide receivers in this range. I think you'll do better fishing deeper in your wide receivers 8th round back to the 1st versus 8th round forward. I think you spend a lot more time on the running backs here. So I think this data is kind of telling us where to invest our research time before our drafts. I really like that. I think that's a neat data and what it's talking to us. So the data is, the trends are talking. Okay. This last bit is kind of interesting, how we could compare this in a different way and show you how that goes. This is the wide receivers versus running back differences in the ADP versus the end of the season. And so what I did was you see the 0 line. Okay, that means that both those are pretty much the same. Okay, so there's no difference in the positions. So we're trying to find where we have an advantage in picking running backs over wide receivers within the draft. And I think the previous one told us what I think the trend is telling us in here. And let's go back through it. So I considered +5 and -5. I just said, oh, that's pretty normal. And let's just kind of not worry. Let's just say that's equal. Okay. I'm looking for more of the extremes. Any data points that are above +5 mean that the running backs are returning better value in that part of the draft. Anywhere where it's the data point is below -5, the wide receivers are returning value. Notice the wide receivers are returning less value, only 4 slots, including 1st through 6. We've had that discussion. Here it is right there, a -9. Okay, so, And then we have it in this range in here. Okay, so wide receivers here, here, and here. So more about the what? 7th, 8th round. There seems to be this little area, this researched here, where it's worth your time for the wide receivers. Notice the running backs, however, really dominate late in the draft, and that's probably handcuff driven. People say, oh, we don't handcuff. This is the data. Tells me that it is definitely worth fishing in this arena for handcuffed and even handcuffed to the handcuff concept. It certainly came into play last season, and I expect it to come into play here. So I would spend a nice bit of time looking at the deeper RBs and trying to pick out where they're going to return better value for you here. So again, anything plus means the running backs are better. Anything minus is the wide receivers are better. And like I said, I went the extreme. +5 or less than -5 is where you're getting the extremes here. So I think this is a really neat chart and another way to look at this. And if you've seen my lessons, it should be pretty obvious that I can tell you I hadn't seen this out there. Nobody's doing a lot of the data like I see it. Okay, that's the advantage, that having somebody who's basically his career has been, I'm not an official data scientist, right? But I know how to use data and stats and analysis as a tool, okay, to explore. Okay, so I have been, I don't make the nails, but I can build a house kind of concept. I understand data scientists make better nails. That's the analogy there, right? But I know how to use it better than a lot. A lot of people talk big games, okay, but just where's the rubber meet the road? And I guess one person would say, oh, do you make money? Yes, I've made money. So I guess if you look at it that way, then that's the bottom line, not how many likes I get on Twitter or Facebook or something. Okay, so we got a really good view of the data concerning ADP versus end of season and that predictive or lack of predictive power there. And I think we now have trends. People call this actionable data. Okay, so what does that mean? To me, it means it saves you time in your research and focuses your time and attention on key aspects. And that's what, to me, is worthy to be called actionable data. Okay. And so I urge you to go back, review this, listen to all my lessons. A lot of them are sitting at Fake Pigskin in the professor's classroom. I think you'll have fun. That was from 2021. And I've got some lessons that are timeless, and you should check those out. Okay, come back. We're having extra amount of fun here.